Hello, my name is Sonja Montiel. I am the founder of College Confidence. I am an educator, a mother of a fifth grader and first-year college student, wife to my high school sweetheart, and a soccer player through and through.
And I'm Hilary Bilbrey, inspired living strategist, author, speaker, mama to 3 teenagers, wife, and adventure seeker. You know, some things are just meant to be. Although we met randomly in a class, Sonja and I really became clear that our work, our values, and our heart align. Soon we began talking about our families and our worries and our businesses, our lives, and we realized we were helping each other move forward into our own confidence and integrity.
We understand that many people have this fear of showing such vulnerabilities that you and I were able to get to so quickly, and it's because of that alignment. But that vulnerability and those conversations are really a way to get to the heart of the matter. And so Decided Heart was born, and this is why we would love to invite you to join our conversations. Hello, welcome everyone. I am so excited to bring in our special guest, Marc Feder with Everydae, and Hilary. Totally excited because we found our people. Marc is our village. I mean, in terms of running an educational service business anchored on life purpose, growth development, uplifting humanity as a whole. And I knew that this is not just an ordinary business leader. This is someone who is aligned with our mission in terms of raising our spirits, raising our awareness, being connected, and being authentic. So Marc and I, we kind of ran into each other and the values kind of hit. Not only was he really focused on, or Marc, you're in the room, not only are you focused on just finding life purpose for our teens, which is so important, but also bringing in those parents or those raising them to really align those values. And then he introduced something very interesting. It's something called Ikigai. And I mean, it took me a while to even pronounce that name. And I thought it was just such a phenomenal kind of philosophy or practice. And I just would love, Marc, if you could just share a little bit about that. So Marc, welcome. And thank you so much for your time. Tell us a little bit about Ikigai and how that's influenced you as a business leader.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I shouldn't take full credit for Ikigai. So I think to set the stage of what it is. So Ikigai is a Japanese concept or philosophy originating from Okinawa, so one of the Japanese islands. I discovered it, and I think the Western world discovered it through a man named Dan Buettner. So he's an explorer, like literally a National Geographic explorer, goes around the world studying the parts of the world where people live the longest. So what regions of the world have the highest population of people who reach 100 years or older, and then studies them. It's like, why, what's the secret to healthy and happy living? Like, in a nutshell, that's what he does. And Okinawa is one of he calls them blue zones. I think there's 7 currently discovered in the world. So Okinawa is one of them. And one of the, I think, 2 main things that he learned that led to Okinawans' longevity. One is healthy eating, kind of an obvious one, but the other is this concept of Ikigai. And there's no literal English translation for it, but if you split the word in half, the word Iki translates to life, and the word Gai translates to worth. So you could say Ikigai is your life's worth. Some people call it your reason for being, why you wake up in the morning, your passion or your purpose, or both, really. The phrase I like to use is, it's what makes your soul smile. And so just set that there for a second. That's what Ikigai is. And so I started, well, let me actually take a step back. How this comes into play in terms of what I've built at our company Everydae, which is our Ikigai challenge, is applying the principle of Ikigai to helping teenagers discover their passion and purpose as a sort of like precursor to the college and career planning process. Because there's so much anxiety and stress on students, on parents, just have everything figured out when you're 18 or even younger. And that's just not reasonable. So in our job at Everydae of helping students transition from high school to career or to college, our main product is an digital academic self-paced tutor. Right now it's covering the SAT, and we'll be rolling out other academic material. My personal passion in the company as a co-founder is the sort of tangential extra material we can create for students in addition to the academic preparation that contextualizes why they're studying. Like, why do I need to know math? Why do I need to take the SAT in the first place? And sorry, this is a very long-winded answer, but
so many good things. So
I only discovered Ikigai about a year ago. But for 6 years, I'd worked at a company called Veritas Prep, which was one of the kind of preeminent test prep and admissions consulting companies. Before we started Everydae, the core team at Everydae came from Veritas. I spent 2 to 3 years evaluating applicant profiles for college and business school. So very similar to what you do as an admissions consultant. And I love that process of helping people tell their stories. But I kept thinking as I'd be talking to these students, trying to figure out like, hey, how do you tell Harvard you're a good fit for Harvard? And how does that story different than how you might be a good fit for Penn or for Yale or whatever the school might be? I kept thinking like, I wish I could be working with these people 2 years ago, because at a certain, by that point, all you can do is craft the story. You can't really craft the person. So this is all, I'm giving you all this sort of, scattered feedback or storyline to say that for years, and I could even go back and tell you some of my personal story as well, without knowing what Ikigai was, I'd always had this sort of feeling and idea in the back of my head of like, I really want to help people discover their Ikigai without knowing that's what it was called. So then as we were building Everydae, about a year ago again, one of our engineers just casually in conversation was like, hey, have you heard of this thing called Ikigai? And I was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he showed me this article and it just clicked. I was like, this is everything I've been already thinking that I wanted to do. I just didn't know there was a concept for it. So I started researching it, studying it, reading up on it. There's a great TED Talk and book by a man named Tim Ashiro. And hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But yeah, so basically connected the dots, right? If everything I'd learned at Veritas evaluating thousands of profiles and combined with my own personal stories of a convoluted career path that, I changed colleges, I changed majors. So I kind of know from experience that I didn't have it all figured out. So that was a rambly answer to your question, but so what I've done is studied the concept of Ikigai, combined with my admissions, kind of consulting experience and personal experience to build a self-paced digital program for students and parents that will hopefully help them introspect upon what am I passionate about, what am I good at, what does the world need, and what can I be rewarded for? Those are the 4 main sort of pillars of Ikigai.
So say those pillars one more time, please, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the 4 main pillars of Ikigai, and I'll phrase them in questions, are what do you love to do? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you be rewarded for? And again, this is a sort of oversimplified, westernized interpretation of Ikigai. I just want to point that out. But for the sake of conversation and simplicity, that's a good embodiment of what Ikigai is.
Well, no, I love it. It's really funny because there's you're speaking my love language, because I do a lot of work in the area that you're talking about. And it's kind of, how are you going to show up in your life? But one of the words that I sort of, it's a silly word, but my friend made me a bracelet even that says it, because it's just the word that I could think of. It's called purpeace. Purpeace. I probably have never shared it with you, Sonja, but I in fact, I'm doing a presentation today and I ask people, what's your purpose? And it's your purpose that brings you peace. Like, it's right because you're content and it centers you, and you're not like this, you're like, oh yeah, this is it. And I feel like that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. 100%.
And I think
also, I love anyone that can combine words into more fun words. That's awesome.
resonates with me so much. Like this should be, oh gosh, when you said what makes your soul smile, it's just so uplifting. And although we might say like, yeah, this seems easy. Why are we having a full talk about it? Why is there a philosophy or a practice about it? When you said teen sense of worth, I feel so strongly being in college admissions for so long. And I don't know how this happened, but we have stripped away all these adults have taken away teens' worth when it comes to the college admissions, college going culture. It's so hyped on these tangible outcomes. It's so hyped on competitiveness that teens, in my experience, have switched to say, they're asking permission on what makes me worthy. And so because it's been so long term, and again, this is just the students and families that I've worked with, but I have counted, I'm on 1,000, just passed my 1,000 mark. So I feel like that's a good number. They're asking permission. And Ikigai is something that I have felt all my life. I think Hilary, you probably felt this all your life, and I think that's what it is. You pass the baton, like I can name it. To slowly bring that ownership back to these young people, it takes, I think you've used this in your academic principles, like what is it? It's micro active engagement. Like it's small chunks, it's bite size, because they don't know what it is to take that back. And that is, to me, I know this is so profound and like high level, but that is why your work is so important. Is yes, you have this product, it's SAT, but it's not the normal product. It's also saying through this product, I want you to find ownership back to who you are as a young person. So totally excited and committed to the work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Teenagers crave autonomy. And if you can give them productive autonomy and encourage them to apply it, like you just said, and as we call it, microactive engagements, or basically small chunks, it gives them a sense of self-worth, accomplishment, and it just motivates them to continue doing that. I think you were telling me the story of the program you put together for teenage boys this summer, where you started out having to motivate them with some sort of extrinsic reward, but once the inertia gets going, the intrinsic feeling of accomplishment takes over. And the whole purpose with Ikigai, or at least one of the main purposes, is to just nudge them down a path. And I think to your point about, it's not the parent's fault, right, that they're creating this pressure, this divide, and, the anxiety around getting good grades to get into a good school, and therefore that'll equal success. I mean, it's a systemic problem that's been created for decades, if not even longer. So I think it's just important to take a step back, slow down. And as a parent, if you find, think about or pay attention to the types of conversations and questions you're asking your kid, when they would be coming home from school, if they're physically leaving the house, and you're constantly just asking about grades and test scores and applications, like what precedent does that set as to how you define success for your kid? But if you instead and this is where the sort of synergy of the Ikigai challenge being also for parents, is my hope is that the student and the parent will talk about these things, whether that's over dinner or whenever it's convenient for them, to align on, what is that passion and purpose that the student has, so that the parent can help cultivate it.
Marc, to your point, just thinking about something we've been calling them pandemic positives. One of the pandemic positives right now is this sort of sacredness. I'm seeing so many people coming back more to the family table. Everything has closed down because it has closed down. And guess what? I want to say the world didn't stop. Of course, the world has stopped, but I mean, things didn't fall apart. Life is still going. We're still loving each other. Our kids are still in some ways thriving even more. Are you finding, has that had an impact on your business at all, where people are like, wait a minute, instead of, okay, like we've got to do this and then we've got to do this, are they seeing more value and being more open-minded to, wait a minute, maybe there is something more. Maybe we can have both of these things together?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, but I think even before the pandemic, there's been an underlying sensation, feeling, sentiment, thought, whatever you might want to call it, that this is important, right? Like we know in the education space, if you follow it, there is a growing trend of, especially since the George Floyd murder and everything since then and the social unrest, the need for social emotional learning. Now, the conversations there are all about putting it into schools, but I think that parents are recognizing, yeah, there's a lot more to my child and to our family unit. And to your point, I know there's data, I think it's pretty much anecdotal survey, but still are qualitative surveys that families are feeling more connected since the pandemic, because, you might think that they'd be at each other's throats, but actually, thankfully, the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
So we say that
things like, hey, I like you.
well,
yeah, it's like when we get to spend more time together and I'm not just badgering you about doing your homework, then hey, you're a pleasant person.
It's from the Bible. Well, I was a college counselor at an Augustinian high school, and I'm not Catholic, but I've learned the Catholic ways through that culture, which is really beautiful. And there is a phrase, or I don't know what you call it in the Bible, like be still and know that I am God, but I really anchor to be still. Being still is one of a parent's superpowers that is very difficult for them to master. Like, to just be still, be present, and that the growth happens. I think this is that forced stillness that has happened, where we're leaning into each other a bit more. I think the huge work is the parents themselves, or I'll just say every adult, because as adults, we value being busy. Work ethics is huge. The more that we work, the more that we're busy, the more that we define our own worth, right? So Ikigai to me is, I think that the parents are gonna be like, this is so good for my team, but through those conversations, I want the adults to question their own Ikigai and where they go off tangent. And is their Ikigai seriously about just the work, or is there joy in the work that they do? So I experimented, I went through your challenge, and it was really amazing to go through those quests and reflect upon myself as an adult, as an educator, as a mother, just as an adult itself. Like, how far did I go off into what I found joyful when I was younger? So I really see such potential of using your tool to kind of bridge the teens with the adults.
Great. Yeah, it is built for teenagers, but it definitely can help anybody of any age.
That's Marc, can you give us a little bit? I mean, we of course ultimately want people to come, and where we'll have it up on our site as well, but where can people get more information?
Sure. So the website to sign up for the Ikigai Challenge is Ikigai, which is spelled Ikigai. So Ikigai.everydae, and that's spelled everydae.com, and then /sign up. So Ikigai.everydae.com/sign up.
Well, and we'll make sure that we have that written too, so people can find it. But can you give us just a taste? I don't want you to give all your things out there, but give us a taste of, if we would sign up for that challenge, what might we expect?
Sure. Yeah, I realized I didn't say that earlier. So it's a 7-part challenge, and it's all over email. So when you sign up, the idea is the parent, you go to that page I just told you, that link I just told you. You sign up, you then enter your kids' information so that they get attached to it as well. Then what'll happen is you'll receive an email every 4 days over the span of a month. And each of these emails will contain a single Ikigai quest. And so what a quest is an online challenge or a quest that takes about 10 minutes. It's interactive, so there's some thought-provoking questions for the student to do. And then afterwards, as an option, there is also a handout. So if you have access to a printer, I'd highly recommend printing out the handout that accompanies that quest. And then ideally together as a family, sit down and talk through it and fill it out, because that's the way that you create the alignment as parent and child. So in short, in summary, you sign up, you start getting an email every 4 days, click the email, click the link, take the online Ikigai quest. It's about 10 minutes, and then complete the post-challenge handout.
What might be something that you would challenge me to do if I were, and it doesn't have to be something that you put out there, you know, even right now, but if I were starting to, I have 3 teenagers in my house, right? I have I guess rising sophomore, rising senior, and rising freshman in college. And, if we were starting as a family to take a look at this, what would be a challenge that I can take right now tonight and go maybe even start a discussion with my family?
It's a great question. Lots of answers start coming to mind. So I'll say, number one, I just say sign up and go through.
Of course. Yeah. I'm like,
but
I got it. it.
I think 2 things that I would hope come out of anybody doing this, and frankly, you should just do this even if you don't go through the Ikigai challenge. Think about what brings you joy every day. What is something that you can do for 10 minutes that has nothing, it doesn't have to do with your job, making money or maybe it does, but just find one thing that you find joy in doing for 10 minutes. Schedule that into your day. And I'll explain also in a second a good way to do that. The second thing would be, what is something that you are trying to accomplish in your life? Like, what are your sort of long or medium term goals? And what is something you can do today for 10 minutes that can help you bite off a small chunk towards accomplishing that goal? And the way I would do this, so there's a concept called habit stacking.
Yes.
Created, I think, by BJ Fogg. I learned about it through James Clear and his great book called Atomic Habits.
Yes.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
So a habit stack is basically a formula. So before or after blank, I will blank. And so instead of saying at 4 o'clock every day, I'm going to do this, because that can easily get disrupted. If all of a sudden, you guys want to go do something as a family at 4, then the idea of doing what you wanted to do will disappear. And so a habit stack is attaching the new habit you want to build to an existing habit you already have. That could be brushing your teeth, eating breakfast, going to bed, walking the dog. Your life is full of existing habits that you just don't think about on a daily basis. So create a habit stack of happiness. So every day, like after I wake up in the morning, I will go for a walk around the block for 10 minutes. There's my happiness, because personally, I need to be outside. This quarantine thing is really getting to me. I have quarantine brain because I can't be outside as much as I want to be. So to me, being outside brings me joy every day. A simple act of just being outside. So create a habit stack. For me, that's one of them. Then for whatever you're trying to accomplish in your life. So for me, if it's continuing to build out the Ikigai challenge, I could say, hey, after lunch, I will spend 10 minutes writing a video script for an Ikigai video to put into the Ikigai challenge. So that in a few weeks from now, boom, I've got all the video content. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think a major takeaway from the entire challenge is Ikigai is not, I think, how did I put it in the challenge? Ikigai is not a checkered flag in your future. It's something, it's how you live your life today. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation or my application of Ikigai is do something every day that brings you joy, so that no matter how messed up this world is or how bad of a day you might have, you can always look back and say, hey, I'm grateful I at least got to do that one thing today. And the power of compound interest and compound growth is so powerful that long-term goals can become overwhelming. This is a big thing, especially for teenagers. Like, what do I do with my life? Well, let's not worry about that yet. Let's break it down into smaller chunks and think about what is one thing you can do for 10 minutes today that'll at least send you down the right path. There's another phrase, tenet that I think I put in the Ikigai challenge. If not, we live by it and promoted it every day in general, is your direction is more important than the destination.
Yep.
And that is so critical to my own career path. Like, I never had, frankly, a clear destination in mind in terms of career. Mm-hmm. But I always knew a general direction I wanted to go, and I think I turned out okay.
I always tell teens, like, that would be so boring. I mean, who has a straight arrow life?
Yeah.
Right? And even if it was a straight arrow, life is about the twists and the turns and the 3 steps backwards and accelerate forward. That's what makes life so interesting and fun. So I I release teens of thinking that there's a straight arrow effect. So I think that's really great to hear that.
One of the things, I guess I want to piggyback on that, on what you're saying, and it's interesting to me. My mind is racing with all of the thoughts and ideas and a much larger conversation. but one of the things that's so interesting is I'm a teacher from way back. I used to teach English to high schoolers, and I would ask the kids every year. I would start by asking them, what are your two core virtues? What is your challenge virtue? And what brings you joy? And it was the reason I asked about their challenge virtue or their positive virtues was because I wanted them to be proud when they told me, oh, I'm so good at kindness. I'm friendly. Whatever. I wanted them to gush. The challenge, because I was going to look for opportunities where they were showing that. So those are the ones that really lift them up. And then what brings you joy? I had a kid that was in my class he would come in and he would be sad and there would be rough things going on and I couldn't access him with Shakespeare or whatever I was teaching that day. But if I asked him about his farm and the animals, he would light up and it brought him into the room and he was present with us. And so I think as empowering as it is for us to reflect and be in charge of our own joy, I think it's equally powerful for us to take the time to ask others in our lives what brings them joy so that we are able to meet them there and help lift them when we have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
100%. I'd also add to that the importance of the uncovering the why. So why does that bring that person joy? So I think I mentioned at the very beginning in my rambly explanation of Ikigai, there's also a personal component that is kind of the underlying inspiration of why I created it. And so when I was 9-10 years old, I grew up in Houston, huge Rockets fan, NBA fan. Rockets won the championship. It's a big deal to a 10-year-old, right? This is like my whole life. All I cared about was sports as a kid. And one night we were watching a game, or we probably did this multiple times. I turned down the audio and would just like narrate the game myself. And I guess as a 9-year-old, it's not uncommon. And I guess I did an okay job, at least according to my parents. And of course, every parent thinks their kid's great at everything. The reason I bring this up is that it got into my parents' head and therefore then into my head that like, hey, you love sports. This is what brings you joy. You just did this little, broadcast journalism thing right there as a 9-year-old. Maybe you should be a broadcast journalist. And it set me down a path without really second guessing that and just being like, yeah, that makes total sense, which then took me to the University of Miami my freshman year because they have a fantastic broadcast journalism school. And then it wasn't until then that I realized this is not for me. So it's like my parents were very supportive and great parents and they were doing the right thing, right? They were even saying like, oh, I recognize what you love. But they didn't know any better to be like, well, let's really think, because this, remember the 4 pillars of Ikigai. What do you love? So check. What are you good at? If you know me, and maybe it's not coming across here because I'm doing a good job of faking it, but I'm a very introspective or introverted person, both. So like the idea of creating a career around talking for the sake of talking, totally not what I'm good at. But I'm good at talking to you guys about Ikigai because that's my passion. I think my Ikigai is to help other people find their Ikigai. So I just want to reiterate that point that, to your point, yes, very important. Like identify what the people around you love, but then like let's break that down. Let's peel the onion. Let's look at like why, and because I think a lot of times students will be like, I'm good at math. Okay, but like what makes you good at math? Are you good at pattern recognition? Are you just good at the mental math, the quick math? Like what about being good at math makes you good at math? And, let's break that down. And then you might start to really understand the pillars of your true skills, if that makes sense.
No, I love that because maybe what it actually is you just like solving hard problems, right?
Exactly.
And so maybe you can apply that to government or to this or to, so
yeah, like maybe you should be a cryptographer, not a data scientist. I don't know, but
so exactly. I think this is a great piece where we can end with our challenge. Is that good, Hilary?
I think so. I love it.
So our challenge, just to remind our listeners and viewers that on our Instagram page, Decided Heart Conversations, or decided_heart_conversations, we're going to have a challenge for you. We would love to know, what is your commitment? What are you thinking about in terms of your own Ikigai? How are you going to spend 10 minutes every day on something that you find joyful? And if I could just up the ante for those who are more on that competitive, is how will that conversation happen within your family unit? Whoever is in that dinner table in the room with you, sharing the Ikigai experience together. Anything to add to that?
Other than I mean, I'm going to go on and take the Ikigai challenge, because I think that that's so take that next step. I sort of see 3 levels. First, let's figure it out for yourself. Second, let's bring it to your family or those around you. And third, hey, take it to the next level with Marc if you are finding that this speaks to you. And I'm listening very closely because I'm trying to figure out how Ikigai is used contextually as an English teacher. Like, I'm like, okay, so it's my Ikigai. Is that it, like?
So yeah, the single sentence to complete is, my Ikigai is to. So think of Ikigai as a verb. My Ikigai is to.
All right.
Excellent.
All right. Got it.
So like I think my umbrella Ikigai, and by the way, throughout life, your Ikigai will most likely change. This is not something that's static. Like, you don't figure out your Ikigai at 16 and then it's like done, right? You, as humans, we continually grow. So just keep that in mind. Right now, I would say my Ikigai is to create. I love to create things. I created the Ikigai challenge. But I think in doing that, I'm also recognizing maybe I have a second Ikigai or a deeper Ikigai, which is I really get excited about my Ikigai is to help other people find their Ikigai. Very meta.
I love it. I love it. I need the t-shirt. Sonja, we need t-shirts that say,
gosh, Marc,
what's your Ikigai?
t-shirt.
That's a good idea. We created some great t-shirts for Everydae, which, by the way, I'll just have to do a plug. You know, anyone that does have a teenager in high school, check out Everydae, just everydae.com. That's DAE at the end. Awesome product we're building to help students ace high school without the stress.
Yeah.
Part of it.
I will make sure we're going to have all those links available for everyone, both everydae.com and the Ikigai challenge. Marc, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
There's that personal growth within us, right? So I'm just so appreciative that you have become, my teacher today.
Of course.
It was a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation. We love finding people that speak our language, which is the language of helping others elevate. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Any questions, Marc, before we get started?
What are we doing here? Let's go. Let's all bury our heads in the sand for 5 years and see what happens.
Yeah, 100. Were we not just talking about that, Sonja? That's so weird you said that. We literally had a powwow yesterday, like a talk yesterday, where we said about how our biggest frustration right now, how can we get a speaker to help engage people who are putting their heads in the sand right now? And that are just waiting. So it's weird that you like literally word for word said what we just said.
But yeah, let me know when you find that person, because I could personally use them. It's just